Hello, viewers. Hello, Gravitrons. I'm More Gravity. Let's play chess. I won this game about 5 minutes ago with the white pieces, and we see here was not inaccurate, but not one of my more accurate games. So we're gonna maybe come to points in the game where I just say, "Hey, this the moves here are fruit punch," meaning all different colors, including reds and other peachy looking reds, oranges, yellows. That it's not the best chess. They're not the best chess moves when they're bunched like that to review because they're not accurate. They're not the right moves. Sometimes it's one or two, then you say this could have been this way. So okay, we got it. Now, um, start review. I played uh, queen pawn to d4, classical way. Now we're in a queen's gambit defense. Queen's gambit declined, and some mostly moves that have been seen. H6 sort of brings things strangely out of book. Some players actually like to do that intentionally, and is also just a move that can be made at some point in time as a waiting move. But here, h6 is played early and controls the g5 square, which is an active square in many queen's pawn openings for white's dark squared bishop to challenge black's queen, or maybe pin a knight on f6. So h6 cutting that out, and also that the g1 knight might move to f3 and then to g5. h6 says none of that. Bishop f4, knight f6, knight b5. Maybe I was a little over ambitious with knight b5, thinking I could get something against c7. I thought knight c6 looked good so as to keep the c pawn protected twice. This might be a good way for black. However, I'm not sure if that's all that great a move because of queen a4. So let's consult with the analysis engine. If let's say, is it white's turn, black's turn to move? Yeah. So now knight to a6 doesn't mess things up all that much, but it's just not all that inaccurate. I think white can play queen a4 here and force black to play an accurate response. And we see a similar theme in the game with the queen on a4 and the knight threatening maybe to play knight c7 check, and it would be a double check, so knight c7 plus plus, I believe. And this is going to destroy black here in the early going. So instead of all that, my opponent played a smart and good move, bishop d6. It's more directly just, hey, nothing's happening on c7, okay, guys? Because the bishops, my bishops is getting a talking to, frankly, from black's bishop, and my knight is maybe wanting to stay at home here on b5. This is my outpost. Okay, fine. Queen a4, nonetheless, like I said, there's a lot of dynamic possibilities behind queen a4. We see that the engine likes queen a4, or indicates queen a4 falls to bishop takes f4. And I'm going to say that's not necessarily immediately obvious, right? Let's saunter over here towards practice mode. One of the moves to contemplate as black is one of the moves to contemplate as black is bishop takes f4, and then white will play, or I don't know if it's the right move, but I would have played this in the game, knight c7 check, and it's actually a double check, which means no piece can capture the knight because the queen is still giving check. No piece is in range to capture the queen, but if they could, it still would be off because the knight is giving check. The king must move. And some people say that's worth a pawn. In a situation like this, I'd say, yeah, that's worth a good pawn. The king moves to e7 before castling and all that, and there are targets, 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 and targets. You don't even have to go to Target to buy them. You can just see them right here on the chessboard. Although Target is a great store. And yeah, I was thinking in this case that white would have the better of things after knight takes a8, but I think that just leaves this knight's gonna be captured eventually, and though I'm ahead 2 points of material right now, white's ahead 2 points of material right now, this guy's a goner, so then that swings things in black's favor. But so we'll just look at this board and know this is also a wild board. It doesn't necessarily scream that, but think there's all kinds of things. Do I focus on rescuing the knight at a8, especially after all his valor and combat prowess has garnered us a full rook? Do I maybe kick the bishop at f4 around? Is making way for my bishop to come to capture on c4 while developing in the process, and now we have numbers. Should this knight on g1 wake up, hit the alarm clock, and get to f3 in time to help bully against the remainder of black's army? So this is, I would say, wild in a strategic sense. Is the move rook to d1 to be strong on the half-open file and protecting our at-risk youth, d4 pawn. Well, pawns are sometimes thought of as youths or younger people, but this rook to d1 to sort of sew things up on the d file there. There are a lot of options here for white. And black, I think, maybe has some things of his or their own to say about the board. All right, we're all the way. This is 8th move of a game that didn't happen, folks. So let's get back to things. Sorry about that and all, but I want to also justify my opponent's decision to play knight c6 here, because bishop takes f4 leads into a lot of complications really quickly, and it's not exactly clear when tick-tock and you're playing the game in person that those complications are going to be good for black as they turn out to be to the tune of 9/10 of a pawn. Bishop takes d6, pawn takes d6. e3, quiet, simple. The board has some things left, kind of hanging here, and there's potential for tactics, but no, I had it one better than that. I said, no, it's not happening right now. I'll play e3. I have a really great pawn chain stemming from, mostly in the center of the board. This will help me develop my bishop to a quality square like d3. The knight can then choose where to develop, probably to the usual f3, and anyways, then it's a game. It's a game of chess. Kingside castles, knight f3. Pawn to a6, and then just, the blunder, bishop to d3. Let's deal with this in two parts. We'll address the blunder later. First, though, the illusion. The illusion would be that my knight could be captured on b5 by this pawn. And it can be, but then queen takes a8, and I have the better side of the exchange. So this a6 pawn is pinned. Talk about a tenuous pin. It's not going to be pinned for long. Bishop gets to d7, and then a takes b5, and queen takes a8 is off because of queen takes a8, and my queen is off the board, my friends, wherever I can point an arrow to make that. I guess I'll make her move like a knight. She may not move like a knight, so by moving like a knight, it shows that she's off the board, because it's not how queens are. So yeah, bishop d7 makes sense for that reason. I don't want to go into too much detail. Like I said, we would be skipping over some of the tactics. And here, I felt queen d1, I think white holds on to some amount of tactics, a little bit of a concession, and a retreat, but I want my queen on the board, and I have confidence that I can make this work somehow. The board is shaken up, and I will find greater moves. Knight takes f3, queen takes, oh no, yeah, oh yeah. Very often we would have queen takes f3, but then the board is dry, and I'm probably going to be down material soon. So I said by way of indicating with my move, g takes f3, the rook goes to g1, the pawn solidifies on dark squares, opposite to the color of our opponent's bishop. The queen might be coming in, not right away because the black's knight is holding g4, but then skirt over to g3, and we have a checkmating threat along the g file. I just thought that capturing with the g pawn allowed white to concentrate force towards an attack. There's a knight here on d6 that's within range in some variations, and a bishop is claiming the escape square on h7, so let's get it going here, white. And the way I thought best to do that, g takes f3, bishop to c6. I didn't see anything better than just liquidating here in the center, but also liquidating in a way that allows me to keep my knight. And knight c4 might be fine, however I like knight e4. It's just a little more aggressive, right? With g takes f3, white is committed towards attacking on the king side, so knight e4 is aggressive and contributing towards that attack. Knight at c4, a little farther away. So that's all. Other than that, I think the two moves are pretty darn close to equal. Play knight to e4, knight takes e4, and I actually moved the doubled pawn over to the e file. It will cost white a move to retreat. All the other squares are taken. So it will cost black, did I say white? It will cost black a move to retreat to c6. And white has the initiative, and some kind of, this attack does not have to be devastating. It's better than not to have the attacking chance. So my opponent sees some of this and sees all this and wants to trade queens, maybe with the move queen a5 check. Has things calculated such that he, she, or they are not losing the bishop on d5. Queen d2, queen takes d2, king takes d2, and we're at an endgame. So with the trade of queens, that stymies white's would-be attack. This position is about equal. I think my opponent, I'll occupy the g file anyway. I mean, if my opponent lets me, I'll just put the rook on a dark square on g3 and then back that rook up with, use a phone? Won't you back that rook up with rook to g1 and have doubled rooks? Some kind of weakening pawn move will protect against white capturing on g7, possibly with check and all that. And then that weakening pawn move might be further exploited, for instance, with pawn to h4 or even pawn to f4. Attacks along the g file. That's the short version of that. My opponent got right to it straight away. This is strong chess. I was surprised by this move, and yet it's definitely, this is excellent, but in my opinion, this is the best move on the board. Possibly second to rook at f to d8, but my opponent played rook at a to d8, and rook at f. You can see even the computer bounces them back and forth. They're very similar in their overall effect. You would move the rook at f. For starters, one more escape square for black's king, and the only other open file is at c. So if black moves rook at a to d8, then a rook should be on the c file, but that's a little bit nuanced. So anyway, rook at a to d8 means that black won't have a rook on c8 helping to control the open c file. By the way, this file is open even though there's a bishop on c6, because how open and closed files are depends on pawns. Black has one pawn on the g file. This is half open. There's no pawn on the c file, so that file is open. There's no pawn on the d file, so that file is open. Even with a king and a bishop and a rook on the d file, it's still considered an open file so long as there are no pawns of either color on that file. I thought rook at a to d8 is very strong move. Pinning this bishop will create dynamic attacks. You don't necessarily look at a board like this and think dynamic attacks. It could be a little bit more dry, right? Cut and dry in the way of an endgame. But let's see. Now I've made the blunder rook a to d1, and this is a blunder, so it's probably more than that. Rook at g to d1 might have been played, but then again I just have played rook to g1, rook at h to g1. Anyway, it's shown here that this was indeed a blunder, and it's because I can see now, not because I can see now, but I see now why it's considered a blunder. Bishop takes e4, and it's going to be difficult for white to guard against, or to protect the bishop with the white bishop on d3 adequately. Maybe not. Maybe white just barely skates out of it. The computer indicates bishop takes e4, king e2, bishop takes d3, rook takes d3, rook takes d3, okay, king takes d3, rook d8 check. With white down a pawn in an endgame. So, I don't know. Maybe I might be able to produce a win on that, but maybe not. So, yeah. So, sorry about this. Not to harp on the move, but we have to do fair justice to best line. And after bishop takes e4 check, then white has some problems saving the white bishop on the light squares on the square d3. King to c3. Rook to c8. And white would be able to just barely deal with these threats if things go well. We lose a pawn on f3. Now my opponent's up a pawn. We'll let some of these moves just sort of get us to the next part. I'm trying to hold things together here in between these two rooks and get my pawns to where they belong, to be promoted, not to be behind bars against my opponent's pawns being the bars. We don't want my own pawns imprisoned like that. So this is kind of a technical king and pawn endgame. My thoughts. Let's start around. Just battle around here. All right. After the trade of rooks, equal number of pawns, and it's hard to tell how long, if at all, white's kingside pawns and d pawn can hold off this onslaught of 4 black pawns over here. It's 4 versus 3, but the black king is committed to that side. And the idea is whose pawn is it going to take longer? So I thought, gee, I'll just scoot my king over there, and my best case scenario, enjoy. My best case scenario would be that white can somehow find a gridlock and that it's not easy at all to queen any of these 4 kingside pawns. Then if I have gotten my pawn to a4 and then a5, then I'm holding the black pawn, because upon b5, en passant captures on b6, and upon b6, regular captures on b6, and then isn't my pawn just 1-2 moves to being promoted? So this keeps the b pawn at bay, and we figure out how to stop this attack on the king side then when the time is right. Pawn to b4, and we can move then pawn to b5. Remember, this pawn is still stuck because the a5 pawn, at the right moment we play a6. If it's a capture, then it's a capture and a recapture, and one move, then another move on the a file. And if black moves beyond, then it's still one move and another move along the a file. All right, so that's a lot of if. The main, I'm not so sure about that variable, is will the king be in time to the king side for this huge portion of this battle? And if he is in time, can he stop black from queening before otherwise? So this is sort of a the battle lines are drawn kind of situation. Well, some of this isn't technically gonna work in book. One quick thing here. G3 is a good try. You do, as white here, do not capture with H. Do not capture with H. I unread in the square. H takes G3 is just then for black H3, and what's to stop? H2 and H1 equals queen. You gotta be a little bit careful about not just the captures, but if you capture and then if the other pawn tries to go right past. So I was wise to capture with my F pawn. F takes G3. H takes G3. H takes G3, and now we can see that the board can't support anything other than a white victory here. All right, so that's it. That's the game. That's how it went, and that's it. So, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more Gravity. Have a great night.